Good evening. Welcome to the Delphi Economic Forum. For those of you who joined us right now, either here in this fully packed room or via internet, it's been quite a journey for these 3 days. It's an exciting and fascinating, I would say, organization that's every year by the Mr. Tsomboko's team, which I would like to congratulate once more. There's 1.5 more days of excitement, and I guess this panel could add up to that. Our topic today is empowering youth and women as a means to tackle demographic change in Europe, also known as we're not getting any younger as a continent in whole. But I guess we have a lot to discuss about. Our time is short, and I will introduce our excellent panel today. Ms. Sofia Zacharaki, she's the Minister of Social Cohesion and Family here in Greece. It's a newly founded ministry. It's been around for 9.5 months, I think. DG reform is much more than that. Nathalie Berger is Director for Support of Member States Reforms, Director General for Structural Reform Support, as is the full name. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And Philippa Michali is here, the CEO of NN Hellas. Always a pleasure to see in Greece a woman leading a big and successful company. And Joaquin Almunia unfortunately had to go to another event because, you know, the problems we faced earlier. Konstantinos Papachristou is here, the Policy and Research Officer, UK Safer Internet Center. So I will start right away with Mrs. Zacharaki in this newly founded ministry with a huge task ahead of you, Mrs. Zacharaki, because Greece is facing a growing demographic problem. The projections, the statistics, are pointing to a significant anticipated population decline by 2050. I think that if we continue the same trend, we'll be less than 9 million inhabitants in Greece by 2050. I'd like your insights into those demographic projections and elaborate on the government strategies to tackle this problem.
Well, Costas, thank you very much, and I really appreciate being here. I know there has been a slight delay, but I think that it hasn't discouraged anyone. I see a full house today with many important people, participants that are here because we are faced with a national challenge, which is a threat. And it's not just a national threat, because that would undermine the severity of the problem worldwide. You see it happening in many Western countries, but not just there. You see it in other countries like South Korea, which has really invested heavily on the issue of tackling the demographic crisis. So I think there's plenty to consider. I really appreciate my participation here, and I think that the Prime Minister himself identified this huge challenge and the threat existing and pre-existing, I might say, by also trying to establish a ministry that is collecting and gathering so many competences from many other ministries. So a daunting task ahead, I can tell you, and has been for the past 9.5 months, but we're really resolved, and we really appreciate the help of DG Reform, whom I thank for today's panel discussion, in really aiding us in a very important aspect of dealing with the democratic challenge, and that is to identify the needs of youth. But I will talk and elaborate more about that soon. So yes, we have seen declining numbers since 1981, so it's not a new phenomenon. And if anyone really tackles it as a newly founded thing, then they may have missed the numbers and the statistical information for the past almost 30 years. So unfortunately, 2021 to 2022 has seen a decline in birth of 10.8, so 450,000 fewer people. And we see that this is also happening because we have seen preliminary data in the first trimester of 2024, and it has been lowering since the equivalent numbers of the 3 first months of 2023. Yes, the problem is here. We would have to strive completing the gap by a 2.1 fertility rate. Unfortunately, we're much lower than that. Greece is actually ranking very low with 1.38 fertility rate, but still the numbers are quite, let's say, they're very indicative of the challenge. Fewer women at reproductive age, and of course we're getting older. The projections say that by 2050, 1/3 of the population will be over 65. So what we're doing about that, not just being theoretical about it, an actual action plan is being compiled at the moment, following, of course, the insight of the European Commission's toolbox for demography. We're working really closely with Vice President Dubravka-Suica who is also Commissioner for Demography and Democracy. And by the end of May, beginning of June, we will have delivered to the Prime Minister an action plan that has a lot of pillars. Work-life balance, integration of legal migration, everything that has to do with housing, which is, of course, a very important aspect, especially when we're targeting youth needs, local and regional development, of course, everything that is identified with the actual needs of young families when we're talking about childcare, preschool, school, and all the methods that we're now trying to deploy as regards demography. A very difficult challenge, almost an impossible task to reverse the trend. That's why you will never listen to us talking about reversing the trend. We're always talking about trying to keep the numbers stable as they are today, and try to deter, even deteriorating or worsening of the situation. We already see the impact in workforce, and we already see the impact in another, even more important aspect, which is optimism. I would say that it's a very important objective to try to better ameliorate the perspective, especially of the youth living here in Greece, how optimistic they feel, how stable and how safe they feel about workforce, about the stable income, and about the perspective of starting a family here, should they wish to. Because it's all a freedom of choice that we need to really pinpoint here, and this is the end result and objective of our ministry as well. So, difficult task, multifaceted. We have already started this consultation process since December with all the ministries, with NGOs. We have been talking with different associations, with, of course, the people around us, and we really hope that we will have an all-encompassing action plan. I forgot to mention that a very important pillar in this effort is, of course, the studies on lifelong care, on active and healthy aging, because we have to look at all the journey and the route of all our citizens from the age of being born, of course, the third and fourth age that we see a lot of people, you know, getting older, but being active and staying healthy. So I would say, Costas, that these are the main important pillars of a, unfortunately, worsening situation, which is not just a Greek state of play, but I would say a global challenge.
Okay. We'll come back to that in the second round of questions, and maybe to see also, we're going to see this action plan late May, early June, maybe to see the root causes of this problem. And let's go to Nathalie Berger. I remember in a clever ad from the EU Commission, I think it was that, or the EU Parliament, like 15 years ago, referring to the famous Monty Python film, said, "What has the EU ever done for us?" And I would like to ask, what has the EU done in order to help the member states tackle the demographic problem and the challenges associated with an aging population?
Thank you, Costas. And you heard what the minister said. The EU is doing a lot and is trying its best to help, actually, the minister to complete some very, very important ambitions, very important objectives. If we look at the situation, Minister Zacharaki spoke about the situation in Greece, and what you're experiencing in Greece is really a reflection, an image of what is being experienced at a much larger scale. We're going to have a population that is going to continue growing in Europe until 2026, and then is going to shrink. We're going to have a population declining, which is going to entail a very large range of consequences, like, for example, the fact that the dependency ratio is going to increase from 33% to 60% by 2100. We are going to have the working age population shrinking by 57.4 million people between now and 2100. And this is going to have a major impact on the competitiveness of the European economy. It's going to have a major impact on the green transition, on the digital transition, etc., etc. So we really have to do our best to address the demographic change and challenge that is going to further exacerbate the pressure on our labor market, and that is going, of course, to have an impact on the public budgets. It's going to create yet more pressure on public budgets, which are already subject today to very important pressure. So I think that we can agree that at the level of the European Union, the demographic change is really reshaping our economies, and it is reshaping our societies. And even in places where people may not be necessarily willing to think about the evolution of the society, the role of women, the role of the younger population, the older, the grey economy, a very inclusive approach to this challenge, we are not going to be able to face it in a successful manner. In the European Commission, we have conducted a Eurobarometer survey, and this confirmed that this is really becoming an increasingly important concern for most of our citizens. We have 7 in 10 Europeans who agree that all these trends really put at risk the long-term prosperity and competitiveness of the European economy. We're confronted with the problem of the population aging, the shrinking of the working age population, the depopulation, the brain drain in certain parts of the EU, and this is coupled with labor shortages. And I'm sorry to be bringing a rather gloomy picture, but I think that we all need to be aware of the situation to be able to really tackle the situation and take the best measures to do this. So what do we do in the European Commission? We've placed a very strong emphasis on the importance of working on the long-term demographic change, and we're really talking about long-term policy developments. Politicians are often accused of only thinking of until the next election. This is a topic where we really have to think about in a very, very long way, and I think the minister here is exactly showing of her ambition to work in a very, very long-term manner. In this commission, our president, Mrs. von der Leyen, has tried to tackle this at a very early stage. She has established, for example, a vice president, a dedicated vice president in charge of democracy and demography, mandated to analyze the impact of the demographic change and to adopt some measures. And we have adopted measures. We have adopted the demography toolbox in a recent communication. The minister very kindly referred to it, which draws on experience from across the EU and really sets a comprehensive approach to the demographic change. And it's very interesting to see that it is structured around 4 pillars: supporting the parents, supporting the younger. Why supporting the parents? To make sure that they can go to the labor market, supporting the younger generation, supporting the older generation, and, very important, addressing the labor shortages through a well-managed migration. We have heard from the minister about the demographic challenges faced by Greece and the upcoming National Action Plan. And we are really privileged to have the possibility to work with Greece and with the minister on this topic. We also have a number of instruments in the European Union which allow us to help the member state. Of course, the European Recovery and Resilience Facility in the context of the post-COVID Next Generation EU, the European Social Fund, the Social Fund Plus, and our technical support instrument, which is an instrument that allows us to provide tailor-made individual support to growth-enhancing, sustainable, inclusive reforms which are engaged by the member state. So there we are working with Greece, and to face the special needs of the younger generations. We're working with Bulgaria, we're working with a number of member states, we're working on reskilling and upskilling the labor forces, we're working on long-term care, we're working on helping the younger generations to face the challenges of the current market.
Thank you very much, and thank you for clarifying what TSI is. Sometimes these EU riddles, initials are a riddle. Let's go to Mrs. Michali, our next speaker. I'm sure that the insurance industry is troubled by these demographic shifts, and I would like to ask you how these, what are the trends in the insurance industry, specifically in Greece, regarding those demographic shifts, and what do you think are their impacts on the market and especially on the customer?
Sure. We've heard a lot of things. So in Europe, and most importantly, even so in Greece, what we're having a decreasing birth rate and also increased longevity. It's good. We live longer. But at the same time, the pyramid, the population pyramid as we knew it, doesn't exist anymore, actually doesn't look like a pyramid anymore. We're having an increased old age group and a decreased younger age. And to put some numbers, again, to give you some figures from OECD that reflect Greece, and actually it reflects to what Minister Zacharaki mentioned before on the trend, that it has been there for a long time. So share of population over 65, that as the minister said, it's going to go above 1/3 by 2050. It used to be 7.5% just 50 years ago. And right now it's at 22%. So it is a trend that is changing through the years, and it's going to continually change. On the old age dependency ratio as well, for the people over 65%, over 65 years of age, we used to have 7 people working 50 years ago. Now we're having less than 3, and we're going to have 1.5 by 2050. So we're talking about huge shifts, and by an increased older population, what you're having, increased healthcare needs, and also the need for additional retirement income. Not just because we're going to live longer, it's also the lifestyle that changes, and this is good. So people going to retirement are not just going to retirement to cool off and, if you wish, follow a more passive way of life. They want probably to start some new hobbies. They want to travel. So this means that they need to have the physical and mental health to do so, and additional income to serve that. Now, is the social security system capable of supporting all those needs? Of course not, and it should not be, let's say, the sole responsibility of the social security system. This is why you're having complementing the insurance sector to cover for those additional needs. If we're looking at youth, there I think we have to question and ask ourselves, have we educated them enough so that they understand how big the challenge is? And
no.
Exactly, I think that the answer is there.
That.
So it was more of a rhetoric question, I guess. So we have not. We certainly could do much more. What does this mean for us as an industry? So for life and health insurance, it's probably more straightforward. We understand we need new product offerings or adjusted for healthcare provision, and similarly for retirement and so savings and pension programs. There, if you wish, it's more straightforward. But even for property and casualty insurance, the fact that we're having demographic shifts means also some lifestyle or social changes. We're having new mobility trends. We're having an increase in urbanization. We're having digitalization changing the workplace. So all these things means actually new risks or different risks. So property and casualty insurance also is getting affected. Now, at the end of the day, what are we insurers, let's say, to do? We are actually the carriers of the risks of the societies in which we operate. And with this role, I think people are expecting, and very rightfully so, that we take an active role in ensuring how we can find solutions aside to what governments are doing, so that we can address those emerging needs that are coming from the major demographic shifts.
Okay. We'll come back to you in the second round. Mr. Papachristou, I don't think if you understand how important it is that you are here, because I think like 10 or 15 years ago, you would not see a panel on demographic change with a young person in it. You would see a panel with everyone in it being more than 65 years old discussing about the demographic change. So Delphi Economic Forum, I think, understands how to set up a panel that actually works on the demographic change. And we would like to hear from you. What are the challenges that the youth across Europe is facing as they exit the university or school and entering into trying to enter into the workforce and integrating into society?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's, as you mentioned, it's super important to hear the perspective of young people. As we live in a fast and changing world, young people are the epicenter of change. You implied in a way that a young panelist is representing all of young people and their experiences. But young people today are such a diverse group of people with different experiences, different stories, different backgrounds, and different opportunities, above all. As mentioned, all young people have a fundamental need to be heard, and at the same time, a purpose and a hope for a fulfilling future which will include fulfilling work and employment. For many countries in Europe, the transition to the labor market is really difficult and a lengthy process. In the recent research by the Noesis Institute in Greece on Greek youth and unemployment, they've used a term, which is the insider and outsider perspective. More experienced professionals are the insider, which exist within the industry, and young people are the outsiders who are joining the industry and entering the job market. As we're increasing the retirement age and we're dealing with a demographic issue, that gap between the insider and the outsider widens. I was also a representative of Greece in the OECD Youthwise Initiative in 2022, and a big focus on our work was young people's integration into the labor market. And you could see the real need for regulation, for opportunities from youth representatives from Mexico, US, Australia, Greece. They all share the same worries for the future. I'm also a young person who grew up in the financial crisis here in Greece. And I know how separate politics can feel for young people. And it can lead to children perhaps losing hope and losing access to opportunities because of that. And I think to a certain extent, although the image is clearly getting better in terms of absolute volume of opportunities, there is still a gap that we need to fill. Because we need to look at employment not only as an absolute figure of volume of jobs created, but rather look into fulfilling opportunities for young people. We should be talking about, for example, work-life balance, opportunities for growth, for excellence, whether that is in technology, policy, or whatever else interests young people. From my perspective as a young person, we often treat youth unemployment and the transition to work as merely an economic issue. But I would like to add another twist, that it is also an issue of democracy. According to certain political scientists, including notably Connie Flanagan, the civic identity and political identity has a direct link to the transition to adulthood of young people, which is divided into two aspects. One of them is employment, and second of all is the ability to become financially and personally independent from their parents. We listened on Wednesday to Mrs. Berger's speech, where she mentioned that Greece has the largest proportion of young people still living with their parents at the age of 29 in Greece. So we're seeing basically a sign of young people being in a situation of waiting, of being in what is called a waithood period, waiting to become adults, waiting to become independent, waiting to formulate political and civic identities. And that leads to uncertainty. And uncertainty and stress, which is also stemming from the access of opportunities, which is also stemming from technological change, is the engine that drives the aggression. And for many young people, the daily struggles do not let them see politics as a viable option to be involved, to participate in, and be active. So where does that lead us? Into three reactions to this situation. First of all, we have apathy. Young people say, every politician is the same. Why should we vote? Nothing will change. Second of all, we have those that perhaps show a more radical viewpoint. They vote for more radical parties, anti-democratic stance. And third of all, we see those that adopt post-materialist values, which are really important in modern-day democracy in terms of illustrating an alternative way of participating in politics through civil societies, through the internet with electronic voting, and through other means. But a loss of trust in the political system, which happened during the financial crisis in the past decade, is really difficult to tackle because it stems from the innate difficulty that young people were placed in, with welfare cuts, with unemployment problems, with a drop in the quality of education. And since the young people of today, which are already voting from 17 years old, I voted at 17 in 2019, in the future, they will also become the key voting group. And these democratic attitudes that happen now and are developed now will formulate the policies of tomorrow and the governments of tomorrow. The economic situation, combined with rapid technological changes, and notably AI, change the future of work in an unprecedented way. Young people do not only have to deal with the lack of opportunities and the widening gap of insider and outsider, but also with the AI and other technological changes that will change access to education and employment opportunities. So we need to change education, first and foremost. We need to adopt a student-centric approach to learning. We need to teach children how to learn. We need to broaden their horizons, and we need to instill a culture of participation, empowerment, and above all, hope for the future that you've mentioned.
Thank you very much. We're going now to the second round of questions. I think we have 22 minutes left, so I would ask for a top 5-minute answer from each one of you. First one goes to Mrs. Zacharaki. Any comments are free for everything you've heard so far. But I would like to ask you, what will the government do, what the initiatives you will take to incentivize the return of young Greeks, the so-called brain regain, and to help them integrate in the workforce? And secondly, how do you plan to encourage greater participation from women in the workforce, particularly in light of demographic challenges? And let me just say this regarding this question. My wife and I, she's here, we have 2 children. She gets a lot the question, how do you manage to be an active lawyer and raise 2 kids? Not once have I got this question asked.
True. Was that the end of the question?
That's the end. All right.
Yeah, so asking a politician to speak like in 5 minutes is actually a very difficult task. I'll try to manage that. And first of all, I take note of what you said about the notion of insider and outsider. It's an amazing concept. And I think as a politician and a teacher myself, who have been working with children for many, many years in private and public schools as well, I've always come to wonder how relevant all the things that we now say as politicians are to you. As former student, now college student, whatever you'll be doing as a young professional, how politics relate to me. And I think that is directly linked to election participation, the citizenship, the notion of citizenship, which has to be greatly delved into curricula as well as career counseling, which in Greece is almost inexistent. So in order to be able to do this great transition, as we read in the title, from the already existing professions to new professions, how AI will make a difference in the professional, let's say, spectrum, ecosystem, and as well as how we deal with crisis. So I think that we definitely have to look into the curriculum again, especially about citizenship, about all this ability, let's say, to react to crisis and react rapidly. And of course, how we deal with the new professional spectrum as it is. Now, you raised the question of how we can increase participation of women in labor force. I have to be very concrete about it. The employment service of the Ministry of Labor has been doing a lot on reskilling and upskilling women here in Greece. I have the numbers here. I don't want to tarry with them. I think that they are quite illustrative, though, of what has been happening in the workplace. More than 450,000 women have been reskilled and upskilled in the past 5 years. And a lot of these women have come to find a job which has been stable afterwards. And we also see a slight increase in the participation of women in labor force, but not as enough as it has been happening in Europe. So yes, still Greece lags behind when we're talking about female participation in the labor force. But we cannot do that just talking about numbers. We have to look at what we're doing in order to enable women coming into the workforce and stay there. It is important to note that the government has already legislated and implemented the first ever, I would say, correction of an injustice that has been happening about maternity leave. We have increased maternity leave in the private sector, also for self-employed women, also for women in agriculture, from 6 to 9 months, and it is a paid leave income by the employment service in Greece. And of course, part of that, 7 months, can be transferred to also the male companion, or if it's a same-sex couple, we have already legislated in order for both members of the couple to be able to deserve this leave. And I think that that was a major step. Number two, we are increasing the money that we give, more than 360 million euro to childcare by passing out vouchers to young families in order to be able to pay as part of the government. We are blending European funds with state funds, state budget, in order to make ends meet and increasing the vouchers that we pay for childcare. We already introduced, and it has been going quite well, a pilot project on nannies of the neighborhood, as we call it. It's a pilot project. More than 308 agreements have been signed for the past 5 months, and it is a pilot project that we have already envisaged the continuation of that, almost 100 million euro for a new project on nannies of the neighborhood starting 2025, where we can help add, let's say, this service for young families. And let's not forget that we need to do more about the legislation. We are transposing the new directives on the pay equality directive that has already been voted on the European level into the Greek system by the end of 2026, while at the same time we are transposing, yes, sorry, the directive on increasing women participation in elected boards, BODs. We see an increase already in the participation of women in the board of directors. Now the quota is set on 25%. So we have already started a legislation committee in our ministry in order to increase this participation in 40%. Let's not forget, almost 7.7 million women in Europe are not working because they are taking care of somebody. So it's not negligible to say that we need to do more about childcare and about, of course, care of people with disabilities when you have somebody that you need to take care at home or an elderly person. So new projects are on the way. Talking about youth, I think that our cooperation, the technical assistance that you are providing us by DG Reform, will also give us very important insight on what the perspective of the youth here is in Greece, when we're talking about work-life balance, as you said, when we're referring to housing perspective. And talking about housing, please, let's not forget the platform of Renovate is open. So should somebody want to renovate a house that has been closed, shut for 3 years, please take stock of the 50 million we have allocated into renovating houses in order to be able to increase the housing stock here in Greece and be able to give the battle of lowering rentals, which has been quite high here in Greece. So work-life balance, housing, definitely the perspective of finding a stable job with the legislation around, of course, labor being secured, and democracy, because it is a part of democracy, and it's a major element of democracy when you're looking at the needs of the youth. I would say, Costas, that this encompasses the effort, and I wouldn't like to conclude without, of course, taking stock of the opportunity to refer to all the measures that have been taken in order to enable the return of the people that left back in those very hard years of 2010 and 11, the financial crisis. more than 500,000 people left. We see a return that has not been, of course, very intense, but there is a wave of people that want to return. More than 250,000 have come back. We see some, of course, tax deductions when they come back, and then they transfer their work here. We also see the Rebrain platform that was launched by the Ministry of Labour in November 2023, where you see new jobs uploaded and you can match the interest with the existing present of jobs. And new things that are happening. Sorry, I know it took a long time.
Back to Brussels, the EU Commission. Thank you very much, Minister Zacharaki. In the 4 minutes that you have now at your disposal, how does DG Reform especially help assist the member states to address demographic change and empower youth and women? We're always on the same hot topic.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned it before, this is really a strategy of the Commission at large. And President von der Leyen really made equality for all and equality in all its senses one of the major priorities of the Commission. We are delivering the EU gender equality strategy really to achieve this union of equality. And we are supporting the member states in implementing reforms in this direction. We need to work all across the board. We have talked about upskilling and reskilling the population, the younger, the more advanced, the older population. We need to work to address the gender pay gap at all levels, and the minister referred to the related directive and the directive on women's participation in the directorate of companies. We need to address the pension gap. I'm very happy that we have a representative of the insurance and pension sector. We have created a pan-European personal pension product, a third pillar pension plan. In this regard, and of course we are also working on the issue of gender budgeting, and there with our technical support instrument we have been supporting 7 member states and 9 beneficiary authorities in the area of gender mainstreaming. So what we have done with this very important project with our technical support instrument is to assist the member states in enhancing their capacity to integrate the gender dimension in the budgeting of the state, and to consider the gender impacts in policy making and budgeting, and to address the associated gaps. We have worked to support the member states, and we are working with Greece in the context of the Year of the Youth, to address the needs of the younger people, and we are working with many other member states to address the different elements regarding their demographic evolution and their national strategies in order to face the demographic gap. So we are really pursuing a strategy that is a comprehensive strategy on a one-by-one basis to respond to the demand expressed by the member states, and also to support the member states in the context of the post-COVID crisis national recovery and resilience plans.
Okay. Commission, right on time. And you answered the question. Actually, the EU has done a lot for us, I can assume. So, our insurance companies, because you have a vast experience in this field, today, are they better positioned to address the demographic challenge while also ensuring gender equality and opportunities for youth? And if you want, you can also answer a question. If you ever had to answer to an interview a question, sorry, are you going to, do you plan to get married? Do you plan to have kids? Are you better equipped than a man for this job? I hope not.
I'm pretty sure that all stereotypes, all gender stereotypes, all women we have met. So I'm not an exception on that. First of all, as insurance, we have 3 levers with which we could help tackle the demographic changes. One is our products themselves and how we adjust them as the needs are evolving and are changing, and thus the risks and the insurance risks that come with them. Second is by helping the society and the community becoming more aware. It all starts with awareness, and we have a great responsibility to help that. Third, which is probably a lever which is not so straightforward or it's not so obvious, insurance as a sector is the largest institutional investor. We have, in Europe, we have assets under management more than 10 trillion. What does this mean? And also keep in mind, we're not just the largest institutional investor, we are long-term investors, exactly because the nature of our work is about fulfilling long-term obligations. What does this mean is that we have a great, I hate the word weapon, a great lever in our hands to do what? To steer our assets towards investments, be it sovereign debt, infrastructure, companies, that can have a positive impact on societies, on sustainability, on the economy. So that's something which is great, and we can help, and we should ensure that we use it wisely. Now, looking a bit more on youth, I will insist on awareness. So I think we all have a great responsibility on ensuring that we educate the people in the way that is also relevant to them, to understand exactly how these demographic shifts are changing also the risks that they're having in their lives, and how soon they should start looking for solutions, such as, for example, saving, etc. Now, as insurance companies, of course, we offer services and solutions for healthcare and for pension and savings. Are they relevant for younger people? I would say we could do better in a sense. So we do have the solutions, but we need to ensure that we make them relevant for younger people in the sense that they can start, for example, saving smaller. Or at the same time, if we're talking about healthcare, going beyond the classic, if you wish, hospitalization products, we need to ensure they care more about wellness, they care more about mental health. So how we can enrich our products to cover the needs of these specific segments. Of course, they need to be, as I've said, suitable for their income. They need to be easy to understand. This has to do with everyone, even more so with the youth, because they need to get used to such solutions earlier, and also to be distributed, serviced more digitally than before. If we move to women, I would say that women face the challenge of, they bear the burden of their traditional role, being the caretakers, the caregivers, both for their children and also in the age, for example, that I am. I feel, like it's like a sandwich. You also have to take care of your parents. And this sometimes, so they opt, for example, for part-time job, or they can even have a career stop. And on top, modern working women, they delay the birth because they either want to, go to advance more in their career so that they can have more sustainable income. What can an insurance company do? For example, see how we can incorporate in our products, how we could cover the costs that have to do with assisted pregnancy, for example, IVF and other solutions like this. And also solutions to support the old age, so that we can lift a bit of the pressure that exists in women's shoulder because they devote a lot of time and a lot of financial aid to their parents. And the above are examples that not just tackle the gender equality, but by ensuring that we have women more in the workforce. This way, we also tackle the old age dependency ratio by having more people in the workforce. So, concluding, I think we do have a responsibility, first and foremost, to educate people and to help them understand, and then ensure that our product solutions are always up to speed and up to date and relevant with the needs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Papachristou, the final word is yours. We have exactly 4 minutes to tell us if you believe that the messages from youth organizations reach the governments across Europe, the national government's ears, and they are taken into consideration when they're shaping public policies.
Thank you for the question. There are two sides to that. There's one which is young people speaking out, and the second aspect, which is governments actually listening. So if we look at the perspective of a young person and a child, if you're told your whole life you're not mature enough to participate in politics, you're not mature enough to understand what is happening, it's too complex, How can you be expected at 17 to have a formulated civic identity and a political identity to fully participate and be an active citizen? What needs to happen is reform education, as the minister mentioned, and include that aspect of participation. Within the school system, for example, exists a national youth parliament, which could be reformed, extended, and hold a youth advisory board role throughout the years of the government. On another aspect is obviously the student bodies, which need to be reformed and not act as a popularity contest, but rather as a form of representation and advocacy. From the government aspect, I think it's quite difficult to truly understand and evaluate the impact of youth policies, simply because young people have that, I guess, mistrust as a result of the crisis in Greece, to the government in general, to the institutions, to the state. And at the same time, there is a lack of a civil society structure and avenues for youth voice amplification. As I mentioned, I was actually a member of the Youth Parliament in 2017, and we didn't feel that there was a significant impact within that framework. When I was 15 years old, I created an initiative because I saw that young people really had a voice and really want to participate in politics. At the time, it was called Teens for Greece, and it was an online think tank where I invited young people to present their views. And what can really bridge that gap between the government and young people, I think, is the internet. A safe and regulated internet, which could hold a pluralist democratic system, could bridge the gap between the decision makers, young people, and advocates. Additionally, civil society structures, which are also included in every form of political decision making, including regional, local, national level, or European decision making, need to reflect on a wide array of policies, not only those that are directly linked with young people, such as education, but also the environment, working policies, and anything else needs to have a youth voice. Because, as I mentioned, it is that transition of young people today which will end up becoming the key voting group, which, if we do not catch early, could have significant and harmful effects on our democracy and future voting patterns. So what we need is soft skills through education, which will instill a civic identity aspect through the education system, through universities, while also working closely with parents, because that's also another important aspect, particularly when parents are introducing at a very young age the aspect of curiosity, where curiosity is so important simply because it's the foundation where critical thinking is based. If a child is not curious, he will never be able to fully formulate the critical thinking, which is so relevant today for our democracy. And
we have to call it a day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
If you're watching us online, don't turn off your tablets or laptops. More interesting sessions are coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.